About tayammum, insha'Allah ta'ala, what some people would call dry purification. Dry because you're not using water, and it is purification. It's purification because you use it for prayer to be permissible. Tayammum makes prayer permissible. And tayammum does not lift any religious impurity. The word tayammum itself means seeking or intending or a target or a goal. Allah says, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا. If you didn't find water, then فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. If you didn't find water, then seek pure soil. Seek tayammamu. Then seek or target pure soil. So this is the linguistic meaning of the word tayammum. Technically, it is making soil, yani applying soil to the face and the hands instead of any one of three things. So tayammum, it replaces something. It is applying soil to the face and the hands instead of any one of three things: wudu, or ghusl, or washing an organ. Meaning, you're not able to make wudu, or you're not able to make a ghusl. You need wudu and you can't do it. Or you need ghusl and you can't do it. Or you're not able to wash an organ. You have a cast, so you cannot wash this organ. Or you have some medicine cream or a bandage, even a band-aid, an ace bandage, in such a way that you're not able to wash the organ. Then you're going to make tayammum for not washing this organ, according to details. Tayammum is a chapter that most of the people are weak in because you don't do it a lot. It's not like prayer in itself, that need like the integrals of prayer that you practice all the time so you know it, or wudu or ghusl, you practice it all the time so you know its rules. Rather, tayammum for the beginners and for the people who are not people of knowledge, tayammum is like zakat and hajj, chapters that the people are weak in them because of not doing them frequently. Even fasting, we are stronger because we do it at least once a year. And this tayammum is revealed to Prophet Muhammad exclusively, alayhi salatu wassalam. Tayammum was not revealed to another prophet, nor was wiping the khufs. Wiping the khufs was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in particular. As for wudu and ghusl and istinja, that was revealed to other prophets too. Tayammum is an emergency purification. That means you have no access to it unless there's an emergency. You cannot access it unless there's an emergency. Think about tayammum like the axe in the glass, behind the glass. Axe behind the glass. You don't break the glass to take the axe unless the emergency is confirmed, not just in case, and nor just to play. Like that is the tayammum. So that means then, since it's an emergency purification that you cannot access without the purification, without the emergency being verified, it means you do not make tayammum ahead of time. You do not make tayammum ahead of time. It's unlike wudu in this case. Wudu you can make ahead of time. You don't even have to pray to make wudu. Wudu is a worship that's sought for itself. Tayammum is not a worship that's sought for itself. It's only an emergency purification. So you're going to leave it behind the glass until it's time to break the glass. And there's two reasons why you're going to make tayammum. I mean, two broad reasons. These two reasons can be broken into details. But all those details go back to two broad cases. Either because you cannot use water or you cannot find water. Either you can't use it or you can't find it. And that's why Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, uh, فَإِن كُنتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ, if you were sick or if you were on a journey. If you were sick or if you were on a journey. Uh, because the sick one is the one who can't use the water. And being on the journey is the reason why you can't find water, usually. And we'll see whatever details we have here. So, when it comes to lacking water, this is where a lot of details are. Because sometimes you have to look for the water, and sometimes you don't have to look for the water. And when you have to look for the water, sometimes you need to go as far as your friends can still hear you, and sometimes you need to go further than that. Now, if a person wants to pray or do something else that requires purification, like touch the Quran, or recite the Quran, or sexual intercourse in the case of a woman's menstruation ending. But the person lacked water for the purification. Then he performs the tayammum because the time came in. For all those cases, the time came in, which is now he wants to recite. Okay, now the time for tayammum came in, which is upon wanting to recite. Or he wants to touch the book of the Quran, or yani, a woman, her husband, her menstruation ended, and her husband wants to be intimate with her, and she does not have water. Then she makes tayammum. The time came in. And if it's prayer, then when the time comes in. When the time comes in means if it's let's say, a makeup prayer, and he needs to make tayammum, then it means now the time came in because he wants to pray the prayer. Or it's just on time, not makeup prayer, on time, and the time's going to be in a few minutes, for example. Then the emergency didn't start yet. So he has to wait for the time to come in. So if you have any question there, feel free. Now, this one who does not find water, this one who is lacking water, he might be obligated to search for the water, or he might not be. And how would we know about him being obligated to search for the water? Because Allah says in the Quran, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا. If you don't find water, then make tayammum. Imam Ash-Shafi'i said, it can't be said that a person didn't find water if he didn't look for it. So to say that he didn't find water means he must have looked for it. So then looking for the water is a condition. Not always, sometimes. When is looking for the water a condition? Looking for the water is a condition when you don't know if there is water around or not. Not knowing if there's water around means you think there could be water. Maybe there is water around, but you don't know. Maybe there isn't water around. You don't know. So then you need to look for it. So then that opens up two questions. Uh, you need to look for it how and when. Uh, when is easier question to answer. When? Every time you need to make tayammum. Every time you need tayammum and you're in the situation where you think there might be water or maybe there isn't, you don't know, then you have to look. Even in the same place, in the same location, like wherever you set up camp. Just because you didn't find water the last time doesn't mean you're not going to find it another time. Or just because you didn't find it last time doesn't mean that there isn't any. Maybe you missed it. So, as long as you deem it possible that there is water, then you have to look for it. So that's the when. Whenever you need it, I'm going to look for it. How? How is by searching within the proximity of seeking help. You're going to look in the proximity of seeking help, not the proximity of closeness. The proximity of closeness is further away than the proximity of seeking help. The proximity of seeking help is closer than the proximity of closeness. The proximity of seeking help is the range in which your companions can still hear you if you were to call out for help. And that's along with their being busy with pitching tents and pots. They can still hear you even though they're busy pitching their tents or busy with their pots. That's as far as you need to go into the four directions if there were obstructions that block your vision and you didn't have something high so you can take a high position to look around. So, if there were not anything to block your vision in the four directions, you just have flat plane, then you don't have to physically go into the four directions. It'll be enough for you just to look. Then you don't see water, then you're going to make tayammum. Or maybe there are obstructions such as bushes, trees, walls, or something else, or just dips, hills and dips, so that you can't see everything. Then, if you're able to take a high position, such as to climb a tree and then look around, then that's enough also. But if you cannot take a high position to look around, if you cannot take a high position to look around and there are obstructions to block your vision, then you're obligated to go into the four directions looking for the water. Yes. Then, if you don't find it, you can make tayammum. And it's not enough for somebody else to look unless you permit him to look for you. Meaning, let's say you were with your camp and then you said, I'll be right back, y'all. I'm going to look for water. And then someone said, no, it's cool. I already looked. Just make tayammum. That's not valid for you to just make tayammum by his word like that. Because he did not look for you. Looking for you is going to be by your authorization. Like somebody said, I'll be back. I'm about to go look for some water. And then you say to him, look for me too. So now he's looking for himself and for you. That's valid. But just for him to say to you, no, don't look. I already looked. Or you can't say to somebody, "Did you look?" And then he says, "Yes." Oh, you didn't find any? Nah, I didn't find any water. And then just make tayammum. That's not valid. And you're gonna look every time, as long as you deem it possible that there's water. If you know there isn't any water, then you don't have to do any of that. You can just make tayammum immediately. How would you know? Maybe you know the area, or maybe you've now been camped there for a while, and you were looking every prayer time, but now khalas, you know there's no water. You've looked, and you looked like several times. You didn't find any water within the proximity of seeking help. Then you can just make tayammum immediately. But what is this proximity of closeness? The proximity of closeness is how far you have to go when you know there's water. Not you don't know, you do know. You know there's water. Then you have to go get it, as long as, even though that's further than the proximity of seeking help, that means if you go fetch that water, they're not going to be able to hear you call out for help. But you know it's there. So you do have to go fetch that water. And it's not too far. You know it's there and it's not too far, then you're obligated to get it. So, what's the difference between these two cases? First case is you don't know if there's any water and you're not going far. So, you're going to look for it every time. The second case is you know there is water and it's not far, then you have to go fetch it. Well, how close is the proximity of closeness? It is the range that people normally trek for their needs, like seeking firewood or grazing their flocks. Because a person would look for firewood in a distance further than his friends can hear him, or he'd take his flock further than a distance where his friends could hear him. So, this distance, you're going to go that far when you know there's water, as far as one would take his flock, as far as one would go to get firewood. Yes, or take his flock to graze. And then there's a distance that's further than that, which is far away. That's a distance even further than someone would go for firewood or take his flock. Mm, Perhaps you can conceive that we must be talking about that he knows it's there for sure. We're not going to consider very far away and he doesn't even know if there's water. So yeah, if he knew there's water, what if he knew there was water and it was further than a distance that people would go for their errands? Then it's not obligatory on him to fetch that water. So then you fetch the water, you look for water. You're not fetching water here first. You're looking for water when you don't know if it's there or not, and then you don't have to go further than as far as your friends can hear you. If you know there's water, then you have to go get that water if it's within the range that people go for their errands. And if you know there's water further than that, then you don't have to go get it. No. Far is the distance beyond where the people would go for their errands. It's even further than the people would go for their errands. Uh, Yes. Okay. And even if you could make it there on time for the prayer, still not obligatory to go that far for the water. Right now, we're talking about a person who cannot find water. Who is the one who can't find water? Usually, that's going to be a traveler. As for a resident, you're usually going to, when you reside in a town, nobody makes a town where there isn't any water. So usually, if you are in town, then there's water. And this is important detail right here. Knowing the difference between a place that usually has water and a place that does not usually have water. This is important for detail that's going to come pertaining to the invalidators of tayammum. So it's going to come back, inshallah ta'ala. So know that in tayammum, there is a detail for someone who makes tayammum in a land that usually has water. But I told you, uh, when we say either you can't find water or you can't use water, really those two break into details, into different cases. There's different cases. There's some is, yani, they are summarized into these two cases. So, what else is like not finding water? What else is like finding water is like being blocked from the water. Like there is water. There is water, but you cannot access it. Why not? Because there's a predator, a lion, for example. So you can't get close. Or an enemy, like a Yahudi with a rifle. So you can't get close. Or a Hindu with a machete. So you can't get close there. Then you're going to make tayammum. Now you're like someone who can't find water. Or you have water actually, but you need it so you can drink it. If you use this water for purification now, you're going to die of thirst later. Then it's permissible for you to preserve this water for your thirst and to make tayammum now. And even you can preserve the water for your respectable animal, like a horse or a dog. And even if he's going to need it later. When we say you can preserve your water for your thirst or your respectable animal's thirst, even for later, if you're not thirsty now, you still can hold that water because you're anticipating that you're going to need it. Or another case is that there's a water hole, but it's crowded. And you're not going to get a turn. You're not going to get a turn before the prayer time goes out. There's a water hole that accommodates one person. There's a line. And your turn's not going to come before the prayer time goes out. So it's like you can't find water. Now you make tayammum. Or you have your belongings. And if you go get the water, you can. There is water, but if you go get it, your stuff's going to get stolen. You can't leave your stuff like that. Then this is also an excuse for you. So here you virtually lack water, these cases that I just gave you. And there's still the inability to use water. Why would you be unable to use water? Well, it could be because you're sick. And then if you use the water, it will increase the pain of your sickness. That means make you sicker. Or it will make your sickness last longer. Either of those. It might increase the pain of your sickness without making your sickness last longer, or it might make your sickness last longer without increasing its pain. And then you cannot use this water. Or it could be that you are fine, but the water itself is dangerous. If you apply this water to your body, it may deform you hideously, or it may deform an apparent part of your body, like it might give you open sores, or it might give you eczema, or it might kill you, or it might damage the function of your limb. You would lose the functionality of your limb. Then, in all these cases, you can make tayammum. But not just some dry skin. Not merely dry skin, that's not enough. That's why I said eczema, to be extreme. And also, not if the water is ice cold. If it's ice cold, you still need to use it because that's a bearable pain. A bearable pain. Sometimes there is a bearable pain, and so you have to bear it. Like what we're talking about now. You need to make a ghusl or wudu, and the water is ice cold. You still need to use this water. Also, what's another example of some bearable pain? Like, what if a person had an IV in his arm and needed to make wudu, and he couldn't make wudu unless he takes the IV out, but he's gonna have to put it back, and putting it back hurts. That he's gonna have to bear that pain because that's a bearable pain. Or like a person's fasting has a headache, then he's gonna bear that pain and finish his fast. Okay, so now it's clear why a person would make tayammum, either because he cannot find water or he cannot use the water. And we already said that you cannot make tayammum ahead of time. So it must be delayed until the time of whatever worship you want to do comes in, like the prayer or the khutbah of Jumu'ah or the tawaf uh, or the case of the sexual intercourse I mentioned for you. In the woman's case, her menses ended and she doesn't have water for ghusl, so she makes tayammum. Otherwise, the tayammum, not otherwise, yani, the tayammum is delayed until after the emergency is verified, which is the emergency is the time of the thing being in. That's the emergency. The time of the issue being in and not being able to access it. So that's the emergency. So you're going to make tayammum so you can access that prayer or that tawaf or that khutbah or that intimacy. Uh, so then tayammum is an emergency purification, just like a person who has incontinence of urine. This person who has incontinence of urine has to do an emergency purification. Uh, Maybe we talked about that. So the one who has incontinence of urine or a woman who has sickness bleeding cannot make wudu ahead of time. Talking about wudu though, but still an emergency purification. Because this person has incontinence of urine, it means that their wudu is always going to be broken anyway. Or this woman has a sickness bleeding, means her wudu is going to be broken all the time anyway. So what they're going to do? Not pray? No, they have to pray. So how are they going to pray? How are they going to make purification? Now this one has special rules, and this one's purification is taharatu darura, an emergency purification. And one of the rules of emergency purification is that you must wait for the time to come in. So that applies there, and it applies here too with tayammum. And not only you have to wait for the time to come in, you must also first remove any unexcused filth. Unexcused. You cannot commence your tayammum before removing any unexcused filth from your body or clothing. That's another difference between tayammum and wudu. If you had najasa on your body or clothing, you can still make wudu and your wudu will be valid. You just need to remove that najasa before you pray. Hmm. Yeah. This is another difference between tayammum and wudu. Tayammum's case is that if you had unexcused filth on your body or clothing, you must remove it before commencing the tayammum. As for wudu, it is valid to do a wudu before removing any filth from your body or clothing. You'll have a valid wudu. Like, let's say, for example, so the najasa got on your pants, or got on your shirt, or got on your skin. If you make wudu, your wudu is valid, even with this najasa there. It's just that before you pray, you need to remove the najasa. But tayammum is not like that. You cannot start the tayammum before removing the unexcused filth. And that's why, if you had enough water only for removing filth or making wudu, one or the other, you say, okay, I need to make wudu and I need to remove this najasa, and I only have this much water. If I make wudu, this najasa stays. And if I remove this najasa, I won't be able to make wudu. Then what do? You remove the najasa and then you make tayammum. And the tayammum is performed by using unmixed soil. Unmixed, yani soil that does not have something granular in it. Soil that does not have something granular in it. Granular means grains, because the soil itself is grains, very small pieces. Grains means small pieces, little particles. So the soil is like that. So you cannot have something that's like that in the soil too, like powder. You dropped your baby powder on the soil. Now you can't use that soil. It's contaminated with baby powder. Or crushed plaster, that if that got in your soil, you cannot make tayammum with that soil or anything like that. Ashes, if ashes were in your soil, you cannot use that soil for tayammum. As opposed to if there's just some twigs, some little pebbles, that's fine, because that's not small like soil. Or there's sand in the soil, you cannot use that for tayammum. That's Shafi'i school. The Shafi'i school does not validate sand for tayammum unless it's dusty sand. The Shafi'i school only validates soil, dusty soil for tayammum, or dusty sand. And the reason you have to be mindful of something granular or powdery in the soil is because soil does not flow like water does. And when you make tayammum, you're going to be wiping this soil over your skin. And this soil is not going to flow over your skin. So if this soil has in it something like ashes or powder, then it could be that that one little particle of ash or that one little particle of powder that's on your skin is the very one spot that did not get touched by soil. So then it's not valid. Can't be sand, cannot be sand, unless it's dusty sand. A Shafi'i only permits tayammum with dusty soil or dusty sand, nothing more. Other scholars, they permitted tayammum with earth. So the word earth is broader than soil. So according to them, you can make tayammum by sand. And you can make tayammum by stones, meaning just putting your hand on the stones and then wiping your face. A Shafi'i, yes. A Shafi'i is the one who said it has to be dusty soil or sand. And for sure, you cannot use dust from the furniture, like a dusty couch or a dusty pillow. That's not valid. That's a bad innovation. And this soil that you use for tayammum has to be purifying, which means that it's not used and it's not filthy. It's not used and it's not filthy like water. You can't use used water and you can't use filthy water. Same thing for tayammum. You can't use used soil and you can't use filthy soil. Filthy soil is like someone urinated there and then it dried. That's still filthy because someone urinated there. So you can't use that soil. And used soil means someone used it for tayammum already. Or he used it to clean dog najis already by putting the soil in the water. Because we're going to use soil for two things. For tayammum and for cleaning dog filth, dog or pig filth. Hmm. Okay, so you have your excuse for tayammum. You've removed any najasa from your body that's not excused. And you have your soil. And the time came in. Then you're going to strike this soil with your hands. Or catch the soil out of the air with your hands, the palms of your hands. And the soil clings to your hands. So the meaning here is if you were striking the surface, so your hands are going to strike the surface. When you do that, the soil is going to stick to your hands. Then you're going to lift your hands and make an intention while you are bringing the soil to your face and keep the intention for part of wiping your face and then wipe your face. Then you're going to strike again. The soil's going to cling to your palms and then you're going to wipe your arms. And that's it. That's the procedure for tayammum, wiping the face and the arms, even if you're using it to replace a ghusl. Tayammum most looks like wudu. Looks more like wudu than ghusl, but it still replaces the ghusl while looking like half of a wudu. Tayammum looks like half of wudu. Wash the face, the face and the arms. I mean, no head, no feet. That face and arms is going to be for replacing a wudu or for replacing a ghusl. One procedure for either one. Sheikh Abdullah said it's even valid if a person put a rag on the soil, like a dry rag. He put it on the soil, and then he lifts up this rag and it has soil on it, and then he wipes his face with it. Yes, and ghusl. There's three things it replaces. Do you remember the third thing? Although we mentioned it in this session. Third thing is, huh? Third thing is you cannot wash an organ because you have a cast on, for example. So tayammum is defined as applying soil to the face and hands or arms, face and arms, up to the elbows, instead of wudu or ghusl or washing an organ. Yes. Okay. So you're going to strike the soil usually off of the surface. It's not usually going to be blowing in the air so that you could catch it out of the air. But it would be valid if you caught it out of the air. The important point here is that you have to transfer it by your hand to your face. If the wind were blowing the soil, it's not enough just to stand there with your eyes closed and then let the soil hit your face with an intention. That's not valid. Rather, what you would do is hold your hands out so that that soil could cling to your hands and then bring it from your hands to your face. That transfer is actually an integral of the tayammum. Not before. You have to have the intention while you transfer the soil and for part of wiping the face. You have to have the intention while transferring the soil and for part of wiping the face. The strike itself is not a condition. You're going to strike the soil, and then the soil that sticks to your hands is what you're going to use to wipe your face. And then you're going to strike the soil a second time, and with the soil that sticks to your hands, you're going to wipe your arms, your forearms up to the elbow. Yes. And it is of the utmost importance to know how to intend in tayammum because you cannot intend to lift the religious impurity by tayammum. You must intend to make prayer permissible. Your intention is to make prayer permissible. Tayammum will not lift the religious impurity. If a person said, now I make tayammum to lift my religious impurity, his tayammum is not valid because it doesn't lift the religious impurity. Okay, so that's your intention to permit prayer or yani, whatever it is you want to do. When we say permit prayer, we're just talking without details. If you want to say a better statement, really, though, you're going to make it, your intention is going to be to permit whatever it is that requires the purification the tawaf, the khutbah, the prayer, etc. Now, this tayammum, what do you want to do with it? An obligation or something sunnah? If you wanted to do an obligation, so that's what your intention was. Like in your heart, you said, I'm making tayammum to permit the obligatory prayer or to permit something else. Obligatory. Let's just stick to the prayer. To permit obligatory prayer. Okay, so that's your intention. That's valid intention. And what you intended will become accessible to you. The obligatory prayer. Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, wali kulli mri'in ma nawa. Everyone has what he intended. For everyone is what he intended. But what about the sunnah worships? Do you have to do a new tayammum for those? Not in this case, because the sunnahs follow the obligations. When you made the intention to make tayammum for an obligation, then that was enough to enable you to do sunnahs too. But if you made the tayammum only for something sunnah, like you wanted to recite the Quran or hold the mushaf, you wanted to touch the mushaf, or you wanted to do sunnah prayer, something not obligatory, and that was your intention. In your intention, you said, now I make tayammum to permit this sunnah. Then you cannot do any obligations with this tayammum. And of course, if your intention was obligation and optional deeds, then that's valid. You can do obligations and optional deeds. So, I already mentioned for you, the transfer of soil is an integral of the tayammum. The intention must last or be present while transferring the soil and for part of wiping the face. And one wipes all of his face, but he doesn't have to get inside of his beard or his mustache. It's not obligatory on him to penetrate his beard or his mustache. But he does need to be mindful to like get like right under his nose. When he wipes his face, there's just the spot between his nostrils. The spot between his nostrils, he might miss that. So he needs to be mindful not to miss that. And also any other spots, like at the corners of his eyes, close to his nose. Maybe he would miss there. He can't miss any of that. No, no, not head and hair. Similar to tayammum. That's what I mentioned for you. Similar to wudu. That's what I mentioned for you. Tayammum is like half of wudu because you only do your face and your arms. No head, no feet, and even if that's for replacing a ghusl, that's where some people get confused. They would say, even for a ghusl, or do I have to do my feet when I? No, no, no. Tayammum has one way. You wipe your face and your arms. Transfer the soil and wipe your face and your arms with an intention. That's tayammum, always. And this tayammum, you can use it for replacing wudu or ghusl or wiping a, a or an organ you cannot wash. It replaces an organ you can't wash. Let's say the cast is on your foot. So you can't wash your foot. There's a cast there. Then you make tayammum as a replacement for not being able to wash an organ. So tayammum replaces three things: wudu, ghusl, or washing an organ. Yes, and you need to keep the order. So you're going to wipe your face, you're going to wipe your forearms, and you're going to keep the order. And the last thing we have here is the invalidators of the tayammum. I thought we wouldn't be able to fit the whole tayammum in one session, but looks like we'll be able to. Invalidators of tayammum. There's three of them. One is anything that breaks the wudu. Anything that breaks wudu will break the tayammum. Two is apostasy. Apostasy invalidates the tayammum. And three, this is where the details are. Uh, in case a person made tayammum for lacking water, he made tayammum because he lacked water, then it's going to break his tayammum if he imagines water or he knows that there's water. Yes. Like, he made tayammum because he can't find water. And then he saw a caravan and he said, maybe they have water. So that broke his tayammum right there. And they say he imagines it. That's the way they word it. Or another example is he saw a mirage. Yes. And we're talking about here, he's not praying. He's not actually in the prayer. He didn't start praying. He made tayammum and then a caravan passed him. And he said, they probably have water. So this breaks his tayammum. And then he needs to go after them and see if he can get some water from them. Or he saw a mirage. This breaks his tayammum. Mirage meaning, I mean here, what he saw was water. And that was his hallucination. His hallucination was water. Then this breaks his tayammum. And also knowing that there's water breaks the tayammum. If imagining is going to break the tayammum, then knowing there's water is going to break the tayammum for sure. That's going to be like he made tayammum, and then right before he started praying, it started raining. Then his tayammum is broken. Or he made tayammum right before he started praying. Somebody said, "Hey, y'all, I got water." Then his tayammum is broken. Okay, that's clear enough. But there's a difference between making tayammum in a land that usually has water and making tayammum in a land that does not usually have water. So this is the case that needs to be studied well because it's going to slip you if you don't study and you don't practice tayammum. So if someone made tayammum in a land that usually lacks water, so it means like he's not in the city, for example. He's out and about traveling in the land somewhere. And he is now somewhere where there is not usually water. So he makes tayammum there. Then imagining the water is going to break his tayammum, or knowing that there is water that's going to break his tayammum if he didn't start praying yet. If he didn't start praying yet. But if he did start praying, then it's not going to break his tayammum. Uh, yes, I'll repeat for you. A person made tayammum in a land that usually lacks water. Yani, this is the most appropriate place he's going to make tayammum. He made tayammum in a land that usually lacks water. So we already established imagining water or knowing that the presence of water will invalidate the tayammum. But here's the detail. If he were in a land that usually lacks water, then this is only going to break his tayammum if he didn't start praying yet. If he made tayammum in a land that usually lacks water, and then he started praying, and then he imagined water or knew there was water, This will not break his tayammum. Why? Because he is in a land that doesn't usually have water, and he actually started his prayer. So now khalas, he continues his prayer. But why does this matter? Because if you make tayammum in a land that usually has water, then you're going to have to make up your prayer. If you make tayammum in a land that usually has water, you're going to have to make up your prayer. What that means is sometimes a person prays on time and still has to make it up. There's some cases where you're going to pray on time and still make it up later anyway. Both. You're going to do both. Pray on time and make it up. Yani, repeat it, rather. Let's say repeat it. Sometimes you're going to have to pray on time and then repeat the prayer. This is one of those cases. Praying on time and then having to repeat the prayer. When you make tayammum in a land that usually does have water. If you make tayammum in a land that usually does have water, then you're going to have to make up that prayer anyway. But if you make tayammum in a land that does not usually have water, you're not going to have to make up that prayer. So since you're not going to have to make up the prayer in a land that does not usually have water, then if you started your prayer and then you imagined water or knew of water, it's not going to break your tayammum. So all what I'm saying here, this requires study, or it's going to slip you. Making tayammum in a land that usually has water, this tayammum is going to be invalidated by imagining water or seeing water, even if you're praying, even inside your prayer. So basically, if you are in the midst of New York City, for example, or Newark, for example, you're in Newark, New Jersey, in the middle of the city, somewhere, somehow, you couldn't find water. As inconceivable as that seems, how can I not find water? Somehow that was your case. So then you made tayammum in a land that usually has water. And then you started praying. And then you imagined water or knew of water while you were praying. This will invalidate your prayer because it's going to invalidate your tayammum. Why? Because when you make tayammum in a land that usually has water, you're going to have to make up that prayer anyway. So there's no point in finishing that prayer. You made tayammum in a land that usually has water. And then you started praying. And then somebody came right in front of you and put a cup of water right in front of you. Now your prayer is invalidated because your tayammum is invalidated. Why? Because you would have had to make this prayer up anyway. You're going to have to repeat it anyway. So there's no point in continuing. You just stop right there and take that water and make wudu and then pray properly. As for the one who made tayammum in a land that does not usually have water, and he started his prayer, and then someone came and put a cup of water right in front of him, this will not invalidate his prayer because he's in a land that does not usually have water. And since he's in a land that does not usually have water, he's not going to have to make up this prayer later or repeat it. And when it comes to a person who made tayammum because of being sick, then this last invalidator does not apply. Then there's only two invalidators for him. The one who makes tayammum because of being sick, there's only two invalidators for him. Whatever invalidates the wudu or apostasy. Because this one, he can't use water anyway. So it doesn't matter whether he's in a land that usually has water or not. He can't use water. He's sick. So he only has two invalidators. Whatever invalidates wudu and apostasy. And that's it. That's what we have here for the chapter of Tayammum.